You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
Try to slice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, weekly art history for all ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and for this TLDR mini episode, I don't want to talk about a specific artist so much as a larger style and stuff that we saw happening in history back in the Middle Ages. We're looking at medieval architecture. So, first off, the European Middle Ages spanned from roughly the fall of the Roman Empire in the 5th century CE to the beginning of the Renaissance in the 15th century. It was a period of profound change across Europe, and there was some incredible construction happening. The architecture from this era is generally divided into two major successive styles, Romanesque and Gothic. Romanesque architecture flourished from around 1000 to 1200 CE. It's characterized by massive, thick walls, rounded arches, sturdy pillars, and relatively small windows. These buildings, like the Durham Cathedral in England, feel heavy, grounded, and fortress-like, trying to convey a sense of stability and divine strength. Around the 12th century, a new style emerged, mainly in France, and that was the Gothic architecture. This is the style that most people picture when they think of medieval cathedrals. Thanks to architectural innovations, builders could now construct incredibly tall structures with much thinner walls. The key features of Gothic style include pointed arches, the ribbed vault, and the flying buttress. These elements worked together to distribute the weight of the massive stone roofs, allowing the walls to be opened up for enormous, brilliant stained glass windows that flooded the interiors with colored light. Now, here are 5 quick things to know about medieval architecture. Number 1, flying buttresses are architectural skeletons on the outside of the building. If you've ever seen a Gothic cathedral, you've probably noticed the massive stone arches that seem to fly from the upper walls down to the piers on the ground. These aren't just for decoration. They're a revolutionary engineering solution. The pointed arches and ribbed vaults inside a Gothic cathedral pushed the weight of the heavy stone roof outwards as well as downwards. A flying buttress catches this outward thrust and channels it safely to the ground. This meant that the main walls no longer had to be super thick and heavy to support the roof. The weight was carried by the external frame or skeleton, and this freed up walls to become not only thinner and taller, but probably most importantly, it allowed for huge sections of the wall to be replaced with stunning stained glass windows. Number 2, medieval castles were designed for defense, not comfort. Fairy tales and movies might have you thinking kings and queens, princes and princesses would live a life of luxury in a lavish castle, but that wasn't reality. These structures were military fortresses first and foremost. Their design was entirely focused on withstanding a siege. Features like stone walls, moats, and drawbridges are well known, but there are a lot of other ingenious little defensive details. Arrow slits were narrow vertical windows that allowed archers to shoot out at attackers while remaining protected. There were also holes and openings in the ceilings of gateways through which defenders could drop boiling oil, rocks, and other nasty things on enemies below. Living inside was anything but glamorous. Castles were often dark, damp, and incredibly cold. Windows were small to maintain structural integrity and for defense, so there was very little sunlight getting in. Toilets, and I feel like I should put giant air quotes around that, were called garderobes, and they were often just a stone seat over a chute that emptied down into the moat below. Rooms were often smoky from open fireplaces used for heating and cooking. So while the castle was the safest place to be during an attack, it was not a pleasant place to be on any day. Number 3, gargoyles were actually functional, fancy water spouts. Those monstrous, often frightening stone creatures perched on the edges of cathedrals actually had a very important job. They protected the building. And this wasn't protection in some superstitious way. It was a water spout. It would channel the rainwater from the roof and project it away from the side of the building. The word gargoyle actually came from an old French word meaning throat or gullet, and it's related to our word gargle. The water flows through the stone carving and spouts out through its mouth. By directing water far from the walls, these gargoyles protected the stone masonry and the building's foundation from being eroded by rain. Carving them into fantastical animals, demons, or comical figures even was a way to add a decorative and symbolic touch to a functional object. It's also worth noting that not every stone carving on the buildings would be a gargoyle. Those stone-carved sculptures would be called grotesques, and a gargoyle is a specific type of stone grotesque. Number 4. Stained glass windows were used to tell stories to people who couldn't always read. In an age when the vast majority of the population was illiterate, stained glass windows served as a powerful tool for religious instruction. They were, in essence, giant glowing picture books that told the stories of the Bible and the lives of the saints. Each window was composed of intricate scenes arranged in a specific order, allowing clergy to guide the congregation through the narratives during sermons. The vibrant colors, like the deep blues and rich reds, were created by adding metallic salts to the molten glass. The process of creating a window was incredibly complex. First, a master designer would draw a full-scale cartoon or plan. Then, glassmakers would blow and flatten glass into sheets of different colors. Glaziers would cut the colored glass into precise shapes, paint details like faces and folds in the cloth onto them, and then fire them in a kiln to make the paint permanent. Finally, the pieces were fitted together with lead strips called cames and assembled into the massive, luminous pictures that would help people understand their faith. And number 5, many great cathedrals took centuries to build. Constructing a Gothic cathedral was a monumental undertaking, often spanning multiple generations. So the people building them often never saw the final product of all that labor. The famous Cologne Cathedral in Germany, for example, was started in 1248 CE, but wasn't officially completed until 1880. A span of over 600 years. These projects were entirely dependent on manual labor, with stone being quarried and shaped by hand and lifted into place using wooden cranes powered by men walking in a giant hamster wheel-like device. Construction would often halt for decades, even centuries, due to wars, plagues, political instability, and very often a lack of funding. Because the building process took so long, you can often see a mix of architectural styles within a single cathedral. A church might have been started in the early Romanesque period, but finished hundreds of years later in the High Gothic style. Now, as long as I'm talking about medieval cathedrals, I feel like I have to talk about perhaps the most famous, the Cathedral of Notre-Dame de Paris, which translates to Our Lady of Paris. Construction began in 1163 CE on a small island in the middle of the Seine River, which had been the heart of Paris for centuries. It took nearly 200 years to complete, making it a living example of the evolution of Gothic architecture. It was commissioned by Bishop Maurice de Sully, who wanted to build a cathedral that would reflect Paris's growing importance as the political, economic, and cultural capital of France. Notre-Dame is a treasure trove of Gothic innovation. It was one of the first buildings in the world to use flying buttresses, with the external arches added around 1180 to support the thin upper walls and prevent them from buckling. Inside, the ceiling reaches up to over 115 feet or 35 meters, and this is possible because of the 6-part ribbed vaults, an early Gothic feature that distributed the ceiling's weight to supporting piers. Of course, one of the most famous elements is the spectacular stained glass windows, particularly the 3 enormous rose windows. The South Rose window, a gift from King Louis IX, is dedicated to the New Testament, and it is absolutely massive. 42 feet in diameter, or for those on metric, 13 meters. These windows, with millions of pieces of colored glass, were designed to fill the vast interior with a mystical, ethereal light, creating a space that felt truly divine and separate from the outside world. For over 850 years, Notre-Dame has been a witness to French history. It saw the coronation of Napoleon Bonaparte, the funeral of Charles de Gaulle, and the celebration of the liberation of Paris in 1944. It also made the leap into popular culture as it was included in Victor Hugo's 1831 novel, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The book helped draw attention to the cathedral's decaying state and helped spur a major restoration project in the 19th century. And on the topic of restoration, there was a devastating fire in 2019. But the ongoing meticulous restoration work just shows the cathedral's enduring importance as a symbol of faith, history, and artistic innovation.
This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.